Too many reviews put sadness in your heart and madness in your mind. Let's talk about The Gorge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we'll be discussing the film The Gorge. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is. It is movie recommendation time. So, Danny G, what's your best recent thing that you've seen?
So I watched a movie called The Booth at the End, which is a 2014 movie. It's kind of hard to summarize, but essentially what it is that there's a diner, and at the end of the diner, in the booth, is a guy, and people go to him to tell him about their problems, and he will give them a mission that's seemingly completely unrelated to what their problem is, and when they do that thing for him, they get what they want. So it's kind of a magical realism kind of thing where it's never explained who this guy is or why he can make stuff happen. But the entire movie is essentially just set in the diner, focused on this one booth, and there's parallel stories of maybe 6 people or so who come to the guy who sits in the booth at the end, and they tell him their problems, and then he sends them out to do something. They come back, they give updates, he says whether it's good enough or not, and what the next thing they have to do. And the entire thing is basically like this karmic justice kind of thing where it's kind of asking the question of, okay, what would you be willing to do and willing to give up in order to get what you want? So, for example, there's a guy who, it's not really made clear who he hates, but there's some group of people he hates and he wants them all gone from the world. And the guy in the booth says, I can make them all disappear, but 7 random people have to die, and there have to be at least 20 witnesses, that sort of thing, right? He gives him like this challenge, essentially, and throughout the movie, the guy keeps coming back and gives updates as he is planning this killing spree, right? And you can kind of see, like the whole thing basically forces him to think his wishes through and think about what it would actually take and what that actually would look like and why he wants this and that sort of thing. And there's this other woman who does not love her daughter, and she wants to be able to accept her daughter for who she is. I think she has maybe a disability, or in some way is a disappointment to the mother, right? And so the guy promises that he will make her love her daughter if she disappears for a week. Just don't tell anybody, just leave. Just live as a homeless person somewhere, don't tell anybody. And so that forces her to put herself in the shoes of other people, how they would react if she were to just disappear. A lot of it is like told just in implication and alluding to things. Nothing is ever explained. But it basically, part of it is like this whole be careful what you wish for situation, where when people get what they want, it doesn't always take the shape that they want. But also it's about forcing them to confront themselves, essentially, through the tasks that they get. And it's like I think it's kind of like a mini series that got re-edited into a movie or something like that. It's a little bit confusing where exactly this comes from. But it's just really well acted. It's like 7 or 8 different actors who just talk, right? There's no other locations. They just have to talk about like their state of mind, essentially, and have to kind of explain to this mysterious guy what they want and why they want it and so on. And it's like there's a brief glimpse into a couple of different people, and like it feels like it was at one point written as a theater play where you could imagine just a couple of people standing on a stage talking about this. But so it's just entirely 100% character focused. And it's very small, it's very human, it's very personal. And I thought it was just like that premise was just really well done.
When did this come out?
2014.
2014. And it's called The Diners, you said?
The Booth at the End.
The Booth. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So I completely found this completely at random somewhere in a recommendation. And I just watched it with no expectations whatsoever. And I just enjoyed myself. It's just a really well-written, very small, very personal story.
Is this Apple?
This is on Amazon Prime in the UK.
Amazon Prime.
It's not an Apple production.
Okay, cool.
I think it's like a TV series that at some point got bought out by a streamer or something like that. The whole background of this is pretty confusing. But right now it exists in as a movie on some streaming service or other.
Cool. I'm going to check that out. That sounds interesting. Let me check that out.
It's very reminiscent of like paranormal stories from like the 2000s, where just it's the real world, but there's just this one strange thing that never gets explained. But it puts people into interesting character moments and situations, and then you see what they do.
Me, I watched a film called Last Passenger. I actually watched this on YouTube. I was on YouTube. It was a very good film. I was surprised how good of a film it was. It was pretty much people on a train. So there's this. So you don't actually see the guy, but the guy pretty much I think he beats up. I don't know how, but he pretty much takes over the train, and then he's on a suicide mission where he just wants everyone, him including himself, to die. So he literally just rams past each station till they crash, right? And then obviously the passengers on that train, they're trying to find a way to stop the train from crashing. And yeah, it's simple storyline, but it was a fun watch. I think there were a lot like different personalities which made it fun, especially like this one like old guy, which I feel like every like if you come to the UK, you are going to maybe not even just the UK, you'll experience this type of guy in any country you'll experience that one annoying person that's like a Karen, pretty much. You'll experience a Karen of transportation. You experience that. And yeah, he was like that guy. He was just so funny. In like a serious situation, he was always like a guy that was all about like by the book, by the rules. You break the rules, then he's gonna report you, etc. etc. He was a joker. But there was mixed personalities, and it was fun. There was obviously different stories. It was mainly the film was mainly revolving around us, a father and his son. It was a fun film. I definitely recommend that one. But
All right.
okay, now the main event, the Gorge. Daniel, for people who don't know what the Gorge is about, can you please give them a little synopsis?
So, The Gorge is a science fiction, action, romantic comedy, horror movie that is essentially about these two people, one person from the US, one person from, I believe, Lithuania, who are hired by shadowy government agencies to guard opposing sides of this gorge somewhere in the middle of nowhere. They're not told where. And they basically sign up for guard duty for a year. And they basically are told, kill anything that comes out of the gorge, which turns out to be plant zombie people. Don't talk to anybody. Don't talk to the person on the other side. Just do your job, keep your head down, and then after a year you can leave. These two people promptly ignore all of those rules, and they have kind of this long distance flirtation where they kind of fall in love with each other and start breaking all the rules. That leads to a sequence of events where they find out about what the gorge is and what they're doing there and what the true mission is. So, what's your takeaway on the gorge?
I was surprised with this film. Firstly, I was surprised for many reasons. I think the first reason was because it was like two notable characters, right? So already there was going to be hype surrounding around it. However, the way that it was presented in the trailer, it felt kind of underwhelming. And I wasn't surprised though it felt underwhelming because it was from Apple. And I kind of have an issue with Apple. Like, C, for example, is a series which I love. And Silo is a series I'm kind of getting into. I'm gonna get back into it. I think the first two episodes I really liked. However, I think an issue with Apple, like Apple TV, is this. Well, mainly this series is very slow, very very slow. So I was kind of scared that this was gonna be like one of them, even though it's a movie. That's one of the reasons. Another reason, because watching the trailer, it felt like it was too big of a world just to be revolving around two characters. Like when there's these type of settings, I like one yeah, these sorry, when it's these type of settings, I love it when there's a lot of people in that type of group survival type of situation. So when I saw that it was like a romance film mixed with sci-fi element, I thought, okay, cool. I don't mind the blends in genres. It's just the way that it was presented, it felt kind of empty. It felt like the world was too big for their story to for their story and for it to be a good movie. But watching the film, I was surprised, man. I had a very good time. I had a good time with watching their kind of like relationship blossom, as well as the mystery behind the gorge and obviously what was in the gorge and obviously the challenges that they faced when they actually entered the gorge. Of course, it wasn't perfect, but it was definitely it caught me by surprise how um engaging it was and how like just it was interesting. Like they did so much with so little, if that makes sense. And when I mean so little, I mean between characters. But even though there was a lot going on, obviously with the gorge and the mystery, and obviously what was in the gorge, a lot was going on there. However, I was just impressed that they managed to keep me engaged with just two characters, with the film revolving around two characters in such a big world. But yeah, it wasn't a great film. It definitely wasn't a like one of the highlight movies of 2025 so far. However, it was an enjoyable film.
So I had a pretty good time and a surprisingly good time with this one. I like sci-fi horror stuff. I like small, high concept movies. Just the fewer characters and the fewer locations, the better in many cases. Like it's just promises a very small and focused and deliberate story. And I think the first half of this really like delivers on that. So the two kind of being recruited by these shadowy government agencies, getting to the gorge, learning how everything works and what their duties are, and then them kind of noticing each other and beginning this long distance relationship where they communicate through signs and gunshots to get each other's attention and communicate. And that's all wonderful. I had a really good time with that. At the 50% mark, it turns into a generic sci-fi action horror thing, which still I think is better than average. It's ahead of the curve. But the second half has very little to do with the first half, which I think is a shame. And it just becomes more generic and less charming and less interesting at that point. But it's still not terrible. So overall, I had a decent time with this, and I had a good time watching it. Second half was kind of also there, and that's I think the biggest problem I have with this movie. I'm surprised at how many people just write this off completely as being obvious trash, and it's not. I like if this was what a bad movie looks like, I think the movie industry would be in a much better place because this is fine. This is like I had a good time with this. It's not a masterpiece. It's not high art. It's not anything really special, but it is a functioning story and it has charm and it has some quirky ideas. And sometimes that's all you need for a movie. So on that level, I'm okay with it.
I don't agree at all that it was trash. I don't know what people expected. Maybe because obviously the two actors are big names, so maybe it just didn't live up to the hype for them.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of calling it trash, no way. What was the reason that they were given? If you know.
So it's all sorts of things. So a lot of people just say it's just ridiculous from the start, that the scenario makes no sense. Like, and there are a bunch of things where I think they have a point. Like, there's a lot of wooden lines in this and things that are not quite there. Like, especially when they're on their date in the middle of the story where he kind of finds a way across the gorge and they have this dinner. A lot of those lines, like it's almost like Star Wars prequels.
Huh.
Like at least he doesn't call her smooth at any point. That's an advantage over Star Wars in that sense, and that's our quota for Star Wars comparisons filled. But there's a lot of hokey lines in this. There's a lot of wooden stuff. But I think the scenario is fine. I think if they had left out the thing about there's still research going on, it would have been stronger. If this was just a mistake from 80 years ago or from 100 years ago, and all this time, the major governments of the world have, if they didn't agree on anything else, they agreed on the gorge must be contained. I also don't think that the gorge doesn't seem that dangerous, because it seems like you can just bring guns. And this is like one of those sci-fi scenarios where if you just, like, they talk about how they sent in some elite troops to kind of shut down the project, right? And none of them came back. Well, if you just stand on the side and slowly move inwards and just shoot anything that moves, it seems like they should have won because these two people seem okay. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't quite work. But what does work is the romance between these two characters. So first of all, these two characters are these jaded, burnt out, washed up elite snipers, right? Who have spent some amount of time becoming the best at what they do, and it's basically killed them. And so they basically are barely functioning. Like, Eli is much worse than this than Drassa is. But they both sign up for this mission there, even though they don't know it's a suicide mission. They believe they will be able to leave after a year. They are signing up for the kind of job where you just go off the grid for a year. Like, don't really think much of it, right? Like, nobody will miss them. They won't have a problem being alone for a year, right? They are not well people, right? And then they find each other. And then the romance starts. And I think the part where they get each other's attention and they slowly kind of open up to each other and kind of find something to bond over which is their love of guns, apparently. I found that very charming. I was just smiling. Like the whole thing with the signs is very silly, where they both have these binoculars, right? And they each have a way to write stuff on signs, and so they pass messages back and forth. There's a scene where they play chess, and they communicate the moves with their signs, and he gets one of them wrong, so she just fires deliberately at him to just miss him very narrowly, and then she just points at the sign really angrily, like he made some like I don't know, he screwed up on a date or something, and then he corrects it. Like that's completely stupid, and I loved it. It's like that part of it, like that sequence. It's like a 15-minute sequence or so where they communicate completely non-verbally. But like this whole idea of they never thought they would find, like one thing they really sold me on was that both of these people thought they would never find somebody else to connect with, and then they find each other in this impossible place. And now they have something to lose, and now they have a vulnerability. Like previously, they were invulnerable because they were just them, and there had no connections, no attachments really. And now they have something to lose. And so when Eli falls into the gorge, Drusilla is afraid for him, right, and afraid of losing him. That's not something she probably has ever said, because the only other person we see her interact with is, I don't know if it's her father or somebody else, but this older guy who is dying from cancer, right? Like I think, like she's already said goodbye to him, right? And she does not. There's no indication that there's anybody else in her life, right? So she's got this very matter-of-fact, very jaded, very cold way of looking at it. And now there's this guy who, like, is alive, which is a lot more than anybody else can say in her life, right? And like both of them are surrounded by death, right? They're both snipers. They've killed for a living. They are surrounded by dead things that just want to kill more. And the only thing that's alive in their lives is themselves and each other. And I think there is something there. Like I'm not just projecting into this just because I kind of liked that 15-minute sequence, but I think that's actually there.
I agree with definitely the relationship dynamic between the two. I don't agree fully with the gorge itself, because I think even though they didn't really build enough suspense around the gorge as much as I would like, I still think
let's talk about the relationship and the characters first, and then we go to the gorge, because I have things to say about the gorge.
I was just going to highlight my point that even though they didn't really, fulfill as much suspense as I wanted them to, I think it had enough entertainment value for the movie, which was needed. However, I do agree with definitely the chemistry that their characters had. Like even like both their situations in terms of like their careers, like they're both snipers, so they're all revolve around death. Even the environment that they're in is death, and then kind of like seeing life being created out of that death, which is them two coming together, which was definitely a neat touch. So I do agree, like their settings was already effed up, so then an effed up setting and then an effed up relationship coming into fruition, and even seeing how the relationship came into fruition, how they're communicating from like miles apart, everything was just messed up, but you found the love in the whole bunch of mess, which was a great touch. So I do,
and that is strangely the most realistic thing about the story, because people can find like a human connection in the worst places,
especially broken people.
Yeah,
a lot of the time
the world has failed both of them, right? Now none of them are healthy, none of them are thriving. Both of them are kind of on their way out, right? In the sense of having given up on life in one way or another. And then they find each other. And then they realize there's more to life. So I absolutely do think there's something there. And I really wish first of all, that the rest of the movie supported this and was about this. That's really my main problem with the movie, is that that's the first half of the movie. What we're describing is the first half. And everything else has nothing to do with anything. At the 50% mark, where Eli falls into the gorge and she goes after him, and then they have to find their way out. And in doing so, they kind of discover like what the gorge is about and what those experiments were. They created all of these hollow men and all of that. Very little to do with any of that, right? Like I didn't pick up on any like thematic connection between what goes on with these two people and the nature of the gorge. You can maybe find something if you really try, but it's not really apparent to me, which is a shame.
I see what you're saying, but does there kind of need to be a connection? Because the main point of the film, well, one of the main points of the film, is the gorge itself and the mystery behind it. So now they're in a different situation where, okay, I do think that kind of like the introduction of the Gorge and like them two coming together was a bit too soon in the film. I would have loved it to kind of like build like that could have like built up to like near the end of them kind of like being on separate sides. Like they could have gone through their own challenges where they're at, if that makes sense. So in terms, so it can kind of like correlate until they meet a point where they're gonna have to kind of like meet, which is the Gorge. I think that was kind of introduced too soon. So, but I do think the Gorge was necessary. In terms of like just in general because of the film. The film is like obviously it's romance mixed with sci-fi, and then I didn't necessarily have an issue with the mystery, as in like the mystery revelation of what was going on in the gorge, even though it wasn't anything out of the ordinary and it wasn't really anything too special. It was still like it still provided the action that the film needed, and like it brought the two characters together, and that was needed as well. So it's like I don't see. So yeah, I don't see like what is it exactly that you had an issue? Like you said, okay, even though it had nothing to do with their story, but does it need to though? Because now they're in a whole completely different situation. You know what I'm saying? They're in a,
It would be a better movie if it did. If those different things held together thematically, and if them kind of opening up and making themselves vulnerable and letting somebody else in had anything to do with the ending of the movie, it would have been a better movie.
I see.
So for example, like one idea is, and I'm not necessarily rewriting the movie just quite yet, but for example, what if the gorge itself was never explained? We see the monsters coming out, and we get some action sequences, where they shoot the monsters and whatever, and where they replenish like the mines or the drones or whatever, right? It's all fine. But what if they realized about halfway into the movie, so they never cross the gorge, they never go for the awkward date, or anything like that. They just have this romance, and they kind of have this plan to meet up once their year is up. Right, so so looking not for the first time in a long time, they're looking forward to something, which is life after the gorge, and then they find out that anybody who rotates out from that post gets killed, in order to maintain the secret. Now, what do you do? That would be a much better story, for example, and it would tie together with this whole thing of letting somebody in and making yourself vulnerable. And now it's not just them, but it's actually the two of them. So, if one of them gets hurt, the other one, it impacts the other one, right? And now they would have to plan like their escape for how to dupe their handlers into not killing them so that they can then reunite. And then them meeting in person for the first time should have been the final shot of the movie. That would have been an ending where the entire movie hangs together in a way where it's a continuous story that is about something, and where the ending of it has something to do with the beginning, and where characters have to overcome obstacles to get from one end to the other. And here they don't really, right? We have this romance, which I think is quirky and charming and fun and everything, but there's not much to it in terms of plot, right? And then the plot happens, which is we have to shoot our way out of the gorge, and we get some exposition about where the gorge comes from and how these plant zombies were created. And those two things, I don't think, have anything to do with each other. And if they did, if the two different halves of the movie did in fact have something to do with each other, it would be a better movie.
I see what you're saying, and I do. You know what would have been kind of cool as well is if when they find out that obviously they're going to be killed at the end of the year, it could have been a thing where they're forced to enter the gorge due to obviously the people that are trying to kill them from above the gorge, if that makes sense. So they could have ended up first meeting in the gorge. It could have kind of like not ended there, but near the end where they first end up meeting in the gorge, because that obviously they're in the situation where they're closed off. So they kind of have to kind of like jump in, and then they could have revealed a bit more about what's going on in the gorge. So I do agree. Like I think we agree that.
Or going into the gorge is the only way they can be together, and it kills them. But at least they die together.
True, but that makes it depressing as hell. And to be
fair, but it would be cool, and people would have talked about it. No, but I'm just saying, like it feels like the scriptwriter had an idea for that sequence where two people are on opposite ends of the gorge. They're not supposed to talk to each other. They're like in this strange, weird place, and they fall in love. I think that was the idea. And then, in order to actually make it a movie, like there had to be an ending, and so the ending is CGI gunfights. And that's really my main problem with this movie. And like them dying together instead of living alone is at least poetic.
Remember, it was
right?
Valentine's Day this dropped.
Yeah, like that was the other fun thing about this, that at least they have a sense of humor about this. Yes, drop this on Valentine's Day. And it's like I think it's a great date movie as well.
Nah, it definitely was. It definitely was. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. It's just I'm still kind of like for me personally, I do agree actually. So I agree that they could have found a more interesting way. I think it would have been way better for them to actually for them to meet at the end. That would have been very effective because obviously like that build up gets you more engaged.
Mhm.
However,
It's also a proper story if you do that.
in what way?
Like as in it's not just phoned in, but it's actually about something.
I see. So, but then it seems like you were kind of like disappointed. So, were you disappointed with the actual revelation of what was like happening?
So here's the other thing, right? So the Gorge. So it's basically genetic research where it's not. I don't remember exactly if it was the Americans or the British or the Allies or what it was, right? But they were working on an alternative to the nuclear bomb, and it was like a biochemical weapon, right? Some kind of virus or something. And it turns out that it's the T virus from Resident Evil that just kind of hacks all DNA and merges all DNA and kind of sends it haywire. And so any living thing exposed to this agent is kind of merged. So plant and animals and people all merge together and kind of create these abominations. And on one level, I really like this because it's kind of reminded me of The Thing a little bit. Because every scene, like there wasn't just one creature. Every scene there was a different creature. We do see like the Hollow Man. We see them maybe 2 or 3 times, but we see kind of these soldiers that were sent in that were hijacked. We see this carnivorous, like this flesh-eating plant that basically just a rib cage and sinew and whatever else. There's like these spiders that grow out of human skulls that swarm at them. Like there's a whole bunch of different stuff. I think there's like caterpillars or like giant like meter long caterpillars on the trees. So in every scene there's a different creature, but it still feels a bit like and then they get into this control room or reactor room or something, and it's just goo, piles and piles of just flesh, right? And that kind of just writhes around and tries to grab them and whatever. At that point, it's completely shapeless. This is like everything has just been assimilated into this homogeneous blob, right? And just as a monster, as a creature feature, as the monster design, I quite like those. I'm comparing it to The Thing, but it's obviously not as great a movie as that, and the effects are not as good. But it's like the same kind of thing where every scene is something new, right? And you keep discovering things together with the characters, right? So like you've seen the monster once, and then you see the same thing again for an hour. The real big problem with it, I think, is that it's so generic. It's just evil corporation doing evil corporation things. It's like, can you not come up with anything else? Like I think it's much more interesting if it's just a mistake somebody made 80 years ago, and we've been cleaning it up ever since, right? Like that would be more interesting. Another thing that's really a missed opportunity is that the world has moved on since the 40s because Drassa is Lithuanian, right? So during the first 50 years of this project, Lithuania was aligned with the Soviet Union, but now they're not. Now they're aligned with the United States. But she still works for Russia as a hired mercenary kind of thing. But it is never mentioned that this has changed, that she is technically on the other side now, right? So that like it didn't have to do this, it didn't have to go there. But why not make her Russian? You know what I mean? Like if you're gonna like, it could actually be interesting that this thing has been going on for so long that the world has changed around it, but this is still constant, right? Like nations have risen and fallen, and wars have been fought, and the world has changed, and everything has shifted, but the gorge is still there, which means, like at one point the world will change again, but the gorge will still be there, right? So I just like as I was watching it, like surely they must make a point out of this, right? Because she's just young enough to not have been born in the Soviet Union, right? If she was born in the early 90s, maybe mid 90s, she's just the generation that did not grow up in the like under Russian influence as a Lithuanian, right? Shouldn't that matter? Shouldn't that be like shouldn't that inform how she looks at the mission, or how they relate to each other or something, because technically they're on the same side, just in terms of nationalities, right? So the fact that the movie did not even mention this, like with a single word, just felt like a missed opportunity. Even like not necessarily to make a political point, but just to show like, look how much the world has changed, and and yet the mission is the same. Anyway, that's just something that jumped out at me as I was watching the movie.
Good points. Those are good points. And then there were like some inconsistencies as well, which I realized that were happening, especially with the way that the way like the two characters were communicating and how the relationship was kind of like coming into fruition. It was,
Like what?
for example, like they at times, I don't know if they were trying to make it seem like it was intuition, but there'll be times where they will know when someone's just responding or when to contact someone, for example. Like even though they would use their binoculars
Yeah,
so you can see how they would respond. But there'll be times where they will pick up their binoculars because they know that the other person is going to respond, even though that they didn't have a conversation like during that day. So I'm like, that's a bit like, that was a bit like,
they
yeah.
do use guns to get each other's attention.
But they did stay consistent with that though.
Yeah,
They
not in every scene, no.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. But I think that that would have been very effective for me. I would that would be realistic because it's like, okay, you can't see each other. Do you know what I'm saying? You don't know what the hell's going on
Yeah,
the other side. So each time you want to communicate, that would be kind of funny as well. Each time you want to communicate, you have to shoot your gun in the air, and that falls in line with their character in terms of like they're snipers. So like they
yeah.
talk gun talk. That's their talk. So yeah. And I do kind of like see what you're saying in terms of the gorge and the simplicity behind it, like the revelation. I even said it before, it was it was simple, it was simple, and I think it being an accident would have been way more effective. But when they're using the gorge, to the intention behind it was to use it as some sort of weapon against other countries.
They were trying to build like a biological weapon. It's implied to use against Germany,
I see.
like in World War II. So they say while the Manhattan Project was trying to build a nuke, we were building this, right?
Yeah.
So implying that we would have used this if the nuke hadn't been developed first. When I refer to an accident, I was just going to say it would have been like the current research going on, like the evil corporation lying to everybody and conducting secret research and all of that. It's just a little bit cliche. Like it's not as bad as a lot of evil corporations in media. Like a lot of evil corporations just flat out make no sense. Like the evil corporation wants to destroy the world. Like who's gonna buy your stock options if the world is destroyed? What's your market if you what's the profit in destroying the world, right? So in general, evil corporations make very little sense in fiction. Because of that, because people they don't act like companies, and here it was like at least research, right? Like they either inherited or stumbled onto these remains of this research, and they're going to continue it in the hopes to basically create augmented super soldiers. That's kind of the idea, and I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. I'm saying it's boring. It's like, can you not do anything more interesting? And I think it would have been more interesting if it had just been 80 years ago somebody made a mistake and we're left with the remains. Like we're left with the consequences. Just as a story, that would have been more interesting to me. Especially since we get very little interesting stuff that actually comes out of any of the revelations, right? And the saving grace then for me is basically there's a couple of set pieces that are fun. Like for some reason, I'm really into church battles. Like whenever there's a fight in a church, it's a good time. I don't know why. Like Hellboy had the same thing there. One of the best parts of the movie was the fight in the church, and here they also kind of take refuge in this church. And actually, one of the things one of the little touches I liked about the church is that there were people just sitting in the pews, kind of just the skeletons essentially. They like the remains, and I got the vibe that this was all of them. There were Russians and Brits and Americans and everybody, because there were like all these flags outside. And like this was the thing that had brought them together in their last moments. There was like a cool little touch.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, like church fight scenes. Also, Kingsman has a great church fight scene. I'm not sure if you've seen that one, but like for whatever reason, put a fight in a church, and I'm there. Like I thought that was a nice one. The escaping in the Jeep. Like hooking up the rope to like the winch
that was cool.
And then going up the wall, and then they kind of have to fight off the like the plant zombies as they're climbing up the side of the mountain, and they have to fight them off with a sword. I have no idea where the sword came from. Don't care. It's cool, and I don't particularly care that like after 80 years it should not have worked anymore. Like even those military jeeps are not that resilient. They make a big deal out of how the fuel basically holds forever. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's like a line that was obviously there to justify why the projector turned on and why the car still ran, but the car should just have fallen apart after 80 years in this place. But just this like the scene of like a jeep crawling up the side of a mountain, and the characters have to, in an obvious CGI set piece, have to fight off the plant zombies. It's cool. Like it's a little bit different. It's not exactly road. Like a lot of action scenes in movies like this, like low to mid, but even in high budget action movies, it's very road. Like it's become quite rare. I think it has to do with like the over reliance on CGI and the volume and all of these things, where every scene kind of looks the same because you can't really build the sets anymore, and so you just put a background in post. And this was clearly a CGI scene, right? This is not like some great work, like masterpiece of stunt work or anything like that, but it was a little bit different. That doesn't make the movie, but I'm gonna give it credit for that. That there's a whole bunch of scenes in this where it's a little bit different. It's not lazy, it's not phoned in. It's fine. I had a good time with it. Even though the second half is generic action CGI schlock, I've seen a lot worse. Like, I've seen a whole bunch of movies where after a little bit of story, it just turns into gunfights and explosions for an hour, and it's all the same. All the characters are the same. All the action sequences are the same. And this is not that. Like, somebody actually sat down and said, okay, let's come up with like 3 or 4 cool ideas. Even if they're not the most amazing thing you've ever seen, they're ahead of the curve, I thought. And that makes it a little bit, I don't know if just if my standards are just so low that I'm impressed. Like, I'm not really impressed with that, right? That's not really the point.
Yeah.
But it's like, I recognize the attempt. And a lot of the times when I have a problem with a movie, it's because they didn't make the attempt. It's because they just did whatever. I watched like a movie and I say, okay, what's memorable about this? What am I gonna remember 5 years from now? And a lot of the time it's nothing. But I'm gonna remember the Jeep scene. Yeah. I'm gonna remember like the whole playing remote chess with the guns. I'm gonna remember that.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a whole bunch of different things in this where I say, yeah, like it's in my head. It's gonna, like, one day I'm gonna remember this. You know what I mean? And I think I said earlier, if this is a bad movie, then, like, or if this was a bad movie, or this is what the example of what a bad movie is, the movie industry would be in much better shape. Because a lot of the time, like, I think there's lots of bad movies out there, but more so they are lazy movies. Movies that were just, that read like a first draft, story is not fleshed out, is not thought through, different pieces don't connect, whatever. And here, it's okay. Like, I wish the end had something to do with the beginning, right? And I think it's pretty easy to come up with at least something that does that. But, like, all the individual pieces are better than average. And so, I don't really understand why people are writing off this movie so strongly, where people are just scoffing at the idea. And it's like, do you not remember, like, those kinds of movies you would find on, like, TV at 11 p.m. on a Friday? You've never heard of them, you missed maybe the first 20 minutes, but you just had a good time. And you never went back to it. You would never recommend it to anybody. But it was a good time, and it was, like, an experience that maybe didn't change your life exactly, but it was something. And, like, to me, half the fun in movies is that. Like, just discovering something. And here, the Gorge and these characters and the little journeys, whatever, while nothing special, it was something. And honestly, that's more than a lot of the movies we've talked about in the past year. Honestly.
I agree. And I think maybe people were expecting, like, an army to go up against the Gorge, even though
maybe
it wasn't presented in that way. I honestly don't understand why. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I don't get why this one is, why, like, it's universally disliked. Like you said, there were moments which were memorable. especially like like chemistry, like obviously the build up in chemistry between the two characters, and just seeing how them two, how that relationship dynamic was flourishing. So it had something for everyone. If you don't like the romance, it had the action. It was like two movies in one, if that makes sense. So it
Yeah,
had the romance scene, and
which
then
is
it
part of
had
the problem. But yeah, that's two
for
movies in
you,
one.
for
I think so.
you.
Yeah.
I understand. Like you made it more like your reasoning is definitely valid. It's very valid. And I agree. Like the revelation and just like the reason for why the gorge is there was very simple. However, I think it for me it just provided the action entertainment value that I needed when it comes to like obviously is a mixture of genre between obviously romance and sci-fi. So I think if actually I might take that back because I was gonna say if the majority of the film was just like kind of like relationship based, as in like we're just watching as if the movie was just based on them two kind of like seeing how that relationship kind of ends up growing. I think I don't and maybe I would have still been engaged, but I don't know. I'm 50-50. I think I wouldn't have mind. 'Cause I think even if the relationship does end up if it was a thing where it's building up to them to finally meeting near the end with enough kind of like what's the word, conflict happening while while the build up is happening,
Mm.
then what I actually would have enjoyed. Like what highlight for me was when the monsters from the gorge. I don't know whose side that they were coming from. I think it was the guy's side, and then the girl was
Hmm.
helping him shoot them
There's
down.
this scene where I think they're flirting, and
Yeah,
she spots the Hollow Man, and she's immediately all business. And then,
yeah,
but
yeah.
then she points down, and he sees them, and then they take on the Hollow Man. I think that's the first time they see them.
I
And
think
I actually
so.
like this. I like that they switch to being professional. Like
Yeah,
one of my big hobby horses is that characters don't act like adults. And here, as ridiculous and stupid as this was, they act like professionals. They have a job to do, and in their downtime, they're gonna mess around. But when it's time to be serious, they're serious. Kind of like that. It's a little touch, but like
it
nobody
was.
made wife. Like here's the thing: nobody made a joke in this. Nobody like there were no one-liners. Like nobody makes a funny quip. It's just when it's time for the action sequence, they treat it like kind of like I'm hesitant to call this realistic, right? Because it's not. But kind of that's I think what I imagine soldiers are like. Like they mess around until the danger's there, and then they're all business. And then when it's over, they go back to how they were before. And this is kind of how they do it, right? Like they recognize, like they're always responsible.
Well, you could argue and say that it is kind of realistic though, because if someone was
Yep.
put in that situation where the only way that they can communicate with someone from the other side of wherever they're at, they would communicate in that way, in that fashion, and they would react to danger in that fashion, especially snipers. So yeah, I think that was kind of actually. I think you're right. It was realistic. However,
It's more like I'm so tired of the quippy wink at the camera, right? When nothing is ever
yeah,
serious, nothing ever has weight. That
yeah,
them behaving like this was refreshing,
mm,
and I realized it's a really low bar, but
mm,
I'm just saying it cleared it, and
mm.
it's kind
Well,
of a
yeah,
positive.
that scene for me is what I wanted to see more of because that was one of my favorite parts, and I think I wanted the movie to kind of like. I think so. That's the tone that I really wanted to see. I wanted it to be a situation where each of them have problems, where they kind of like help them with their problems, but from their side of it. That obviously that adds the difficulty, that adds difficultness, right? And but it makes it more interesting because in that scene where obviously she's shooting from the other side of flipping, let's call it the border, the gorge, it was
Yeah,
it was just cool seeing, and I think it would have made it different if each situation that they're trying to help each other.
they
Yeah,
have to work together. It's not
yeah,
like everybody's got their side of the gorge. Like they have to. Like the
yeah,
way the thing is set up is that they have to help each other.
yeah. And
But
there was
then
only one
but then they're
situation.
told they cannot interact. So
Mm,
they're supposed to be there, just do the job, ignore the other person, just do your thing.
mm,
But the way the thing is actually set up is that they have to work together,
mm.
which is probably something they are. If there's some undergraduate student, film student out there, I'm sure you can get a 10-page paper out of that.
Yeah. But also, no, when you saw like one situation where they worked together from the other side, because after that scenario, they jumped straight into meeting and then going on the date, and then
Yeah,
they met. So I
I
was like,
think the
ah,
date is the mistake. Like I
yeah.
think they should have stayed remote and just found a way of communicating.
And the last scene could have literally been them two meeting and then them two
Yeah,
actually playing chess when they're meeting at the end, that could have been like a perfect scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just introduced a bit too soon.
And
What
then
do
the
you think?
actual ending, which is the handler coming in to kill all of them, and then the whole thing with the self destruct and all of that. At that point, I kind of didn't care anymore. At that point, it
That's
was
what I was
just
gonna ask
CGI.
you. I was gonna ask you, how did you feel about their pretty much motivation for the reason why? How did you feel about their reasoning for what they were doing? Like, I didn't get why they were killing each person that visited the gorge. Maybe obviously they're trying to keep discretion and secrecy. Cool.
It is about secrecy, but here's my
Mm,
question: the guy who kills the guy, who kills them,
true.
right? Like
True.
there's dozens and dozens of people who run this stuff, who take the updates and who drop off the person and who dispose of the person who rotates out and who deliver the supplies, the ammo and the mines and the drones. A bunch of people know about this. Like the scenario is not set up in such a way where it's completely anonymous and secret, when nobody knows what's going on, and you can construct it that way, right? You can construct it in a way where everybody knows a tiny piece, but nobody knows what's actually going on. But there has to be somebody who sits at the gorge and is responsible for making it all work. And so that person has to know the whole story, and so that is why you have to kill them. So that is like another weakness in the script, I thought, where it's not justified why they have to be killed, but nobody else. Just give them a major payout, and if they talk, who's gonna believe them? Right? I think that's much more plausible. And so if you want this whole thing about at the end you get killed, which again, I don't think really tied into the story, other than the characters don't want to be killed.
Yeah.
But if it's all of this whole thing about they go there to die and then they find new life and now they have something to lose, maybe it would have been stronger if they even signed up for a suicide mission on the logic that they don't have anything to lose. And then when they do finally, they try to second guess it and then they have to find a way out.
Yeah,
That
that
would
would
have
have
that
been.
would have been more interesting. So
Yeah.
I think there's a whole bunch of pieces here that are not really justified. That don't really fit together. Like why kill everybody who rotates out, but why is it okay for dozens of people who are involved in the rest of the operation to know everything about it and all of that, right? Like is the Sigourney Weaver character, what's her name, Bartholomew, like is she gonna get killed because she knows a lot, right? It's like all of these questions, right? And I think it's just there because that's what evil companies do. Like, of course, the person is being lied to about getting to leave at the end, and it's a little bit unmotivated, right? So, like, there's just little things like this. And
Yeah.
so when they actually do show up in the end in the helicopter to kill all of them, and it's this big shootout, and they set off the self-destruct. I don't really care anymore. Like the story's happened. I've gotten my action sequences, and it's not like it's poorly made or anything. And then the actual end, where they reunite at this little restaurant in France, completely pointless.
Yeah.
Like it's just there to have a happy end, but in terms of like their arcs or their journeys or whatever, that's not what that's about, right? The ending should be like the exclamation mark at the end of the sentence, right? It should be
Was
the
that even
point.
ever foreshadowed? Like even where they met up, how
No, it's
they
it's
met up.
just in the end they win. That's
Yeah,
the end.
yeah, but that's why I found it pointless because I said, okay,
Yeah.
like it would have made more sense, like you said before, if the ending was them finally meeting. Because in that scene there, it just felt so random. Number one, how the hell did you find her? Number two,
Well, she
uh,
she did say that. She says, "I know a place in
okay,
France where we can hide." And so
true,
if
true,
we get separated, that's where we meet up, and then they do. And then
true, true.
it's the and then they do part. That's the problem, because
Mm,
nothing happens between one and the other.
yeah,
They
yeah,
just they say they were going to meet there, and then they do. End of
mm.
movie. So like it's just a wasted opportunity. Something more interesting could have been done in that scene.
Is there anything else that you would like to bring up before we get to last thoughts?
I think that about covers it.
So, overall, I like I said, it was definitely not a memorable movie, but it's definitely a kind of like a fleeting experience, like entertainment type of experience. You can definitely call it a popcorn movie. It's a film. I don't agree with what people are saying in terms of it being like basically it's got something that you'll like. So if you're not really into the whole romance, element to it, you'll definitely enjoy the action. For me personally, I think like you said, the monster scenes and obviously the shooting CGI scenes for me are competent. All in all, I enjoyed the chemistry. I enjoyed seeing how that blossomed. Um, but obviously there was some issues. I think the story could have been done a different way for it to be, for it to have been more effective, especially them actually. I think they met too soon. They should have met near the end. They should have built up to that. However, all in all, I think it was a good watch, man. It was a good movie. I definitely recommend this film. I'm just gonna give it a 6.75 out of 10, because I think it's just I wouldn't call it a seven.
Yeah, I think this is fine. This is a good time. Lots of room for improvement. I wish like the ending had more to do with the actual point of the movie. I think people are writing this off too quickly. I think this is an absolutely watchable movie, and normally that's like a cop out in terms of a review. But so many movies are not watchable, right? Like so many movies don't have anything to them where that's grabbing your attention or that's a little bit different. And I think this has a bunch of ideas. They're just not very polished. And I think it's got an unfair reputation for being just complete nonsense, and it's not. I think it's got a human core. I think it's got a couple of interesting scenes and set pieces. It's cheap. It's simple. It's small, but it has charm. And sometimes that's all a movie needs. So I had a good time with it. So it's a 5 out of 7.
All right, guys. Well, heard it here first. Thank you very much for tuning into today's episode.
If you like this video, tell a friend. If you hated this, tell an enemy.
Yeah, guys, we'll catch you next week. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. See ya. Bye bye.
Bye bye.